The Dialed In Angling Podcast, presented by Strike Master Augers, Onyx Fish, St. Croix Rods, and the Minnesota DNR Ice Safety. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Dialed In Angling Podcast. Just got back from Florida, fishing open water. It felt great. You know, after ice fishing all winter, I just needed to cast a line. And this week on the podcast, joining me is my son, Robbie Roach. He was down fishing with me in Florida as well. Robbie, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You know, it was a lot of fun to be down there casting. I know leading up to the Florida trip, we were ice fishing. We were actually up on Red Lake. That was a lot of fun. I filmed a Dialed In Angling up there with my buddy Nick Sakella and Jake Stockard. Jake was like, we got to get back up there. So I ran back up there and fished again. It was really fun being back up there on the ice and literally going from ice fishing to Florida and now back to ice fishing today. So really within a few days span, we ice fished, we open water fished in Florida, and then we ice fished once again today. We're going to talk details on all of that stuff. I want to get right into Florida though, because we had booked a guide trip, and we always shore fish when we're down there too. We always bring line, lures, a lot of times just hooks and sinkers. We always bring reels, and then we typically will just go buy a couple rods, right? Mm-hmm. Whether we need I don't know, sometimes we're surf fishing, sometimes we're doing more inshore stuff. Most of the time, the last few years, we've been doing more inshore stuff. This year was no different. We grabbed a couple rods, and we were pretty much set up. I think the one thing I'd do different is I would have brought some braid. We didn't bring braid. We brought heavier mono, like 25 pound mono, which is fine, but it's nice having that braid. But you did land a nice snook from shore. I would say like a 32-inch snook from shore? Yeah, with Suffix mono, and literally just casting a shrimp into like slack water, which I watched it happen. Tell our listeners how you caught that big snook.
Yeah, so we rented a pontoon and we went down the channel and we checked out the Gulf, and we were coming back in. The tide was just ripping into the channel, and there's this like clam mussel point that stuck out. So we parked the pontoon, and just on this point, the tide was just ripping, and then there's this eddy of slack water that was just doing like a whirlpool, and I casted a live shrimp right in the slack water, and that snook was just sitting there chasing bait, and he picked up that shrimp and just took off into the current. It was really cool.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, you don't realize how powerful those fish are until you get hooked up on them. All saltwater fish. I mean, they fight like crazy. And if you've never caught a snook before, I mean, they're like all muscle. They're like they sort of look like a cross between a walleye, bass / I don't even know. I mean, they're just a fun fish to catch. We love catching snook when we're down there. You can catch them from shore. You can go out with guides. We've caught a ton of snook with guides. We actually, what we'll do is we'll take opportunities to fish like from shore. If we see like a jetty or if we see like a slack water area, we always try to play the current and either catch sheep's head, snook, whatever is available, snapper. We kind of caught all of the above this trip, but we went out with a charter one day as well. Hingham High Charters out of Crystal River, Florida. And those dudes are super cool. They were like, hey, what do you want to catch? I kind of just told them, hey, we've been ice fishing for the last 6 months. We really just want to cast, throw some plastics. And that's exactly what we did. He brought live bait, and we actually went and caught some bait. He had some traps out, and we caught some bait. But we were able to throw plastics. Like, we mainly targeted gag grouper the first, couple of hours, right?
Yeah.
And we caught them on big swim baits. I think you were using some
pinfish.
Pinfish. I casted swim baits the whole time. I could have easily used the pinfish, but I just wanted to feel that thump. And I was catching them pretty consistently on the paddle tail. So I really didn't deviate from that, but that was super cool because we're only fishing in like 20 feet. But if you think about how far you have to go out to get to 20 feet of water, was pretty incredible. And we were kind of targeting these rock piles or ledges. And we ran out probably 10 miles into the Gulf and, hit these spots. This guide, obviously has a lot of spots out in that area, but dropped in, threw a paddle tail out there, and it's basically like ripping it for a walleye. I mean, you let it hit the bottom, snap it, let it hit the bottom, snap it, and they're either going to hit it on the fall or they pick it up off the bottom. And I caught quite a few grouper. I lost a giant one. I caught quite a few big ones. I'll post some pictures here as we post the podcast. I'll post some pictures of Robbie and I with both saltwater fish and then, of course, the fish that we caught today, ice fishing, and we'll get into that in a bit. But the other intriguing part of not just getting out casting, but it always seems like these captains all fish differently, right? Some captains are really focused in on live bait fishing. These guys from Hingham High seem to like to use both. I really wanted to target gay grouper with jerkbait, with jerkbaits, but it was obviously not a jerkbait season, right? I mean, he didn't even tie one on. So he's like, I use a paddle tail, and then he put a pinfish on yours. So I always let the captains do what they do, right? I never try to tell them how I want to fish because, as someone that runs a guide service and as a guide, I never want to pigeonhole somebody into, okay, this is how I want to fish. I let them tell us how they want to fish. And all guides are different. We've gone out with all sorts of different captains, inshore and offshore, and they all fish differently. And so I never want to kind of pigeonhole them into how I want to fish, right? You let them do their thing. That's like, I always tell my kids or my wife when we go out fishing with these guys, like, don't tell them what I do for a living. Don't tell them I'm a fishing guide. And I know that probably sounds weird. And my wife's always like, why don't you do that? It's because I don't want them to deviate from how they fish. Okay. I just want them, like any other guide trip, they're just taking someone fishing. And they're always amazed, like with me and Robbie, because they're like, dang, these guys can fish, right? They know instantly, like, that you're a good fisherman. You don't have to tell them that. And so when we got out there, I mean, it wasn't like we were pinpoint casting mangroves or something where you really had to be on point with your casts. This trip, it was just like, chuck it out there and wait till something bites. And it was interesting though. It's like, once they got fired up, it's just kind of like snook, going back to snook fishing. A lot of times snook fishing will get these pilchard minnows and they load like this, looks like an open baseball bat, and they chuck them up into the mangroves or up along the edges, and they're trying to get these fish fired up. He did the same thing with the pinfish. As soon as we'd pull up to these spots, he'd start dumping pinfish, and it would get those fish fired up, and then boom, we'd get a fish on, and super fun to feel that thump of a fish hitting a swim bait. Especially I was throwing I would say like a 1.5 ounce head with maybe like a 5-inch bait. And those things were crushing it. I mean, they would like straighten out your rod before, like you'd go to snap it, boom, they would like just straighten out that line. And I know with you too, with that pinfish, it wasn't like it was a light little bite. You had to wait for a strike indication. I mean, they straighten it out. I mean, they hit it hard.
Yeah, they do. It was crazy because a lot of times they'd hit the pinfish before it hit the bottom because they're used to just feeding up, grabbing stuff, and then shoot back into that ledge. And when that pinfish would get close to them, they just thump it and they'd take off into that reef, and you got to rip them out of there.
Yeah, it's interesting with the grouper. If you don't set the hook and get them up out of there, they dive down in the rocks and they try to cut you off. And super cool experience. And what was interesting too is like Robbie referred to us parking the pontoon. We also rented a pontoon and went out on our own. Now, I wish I would have went out the day after we went with this guy, not just for his spots, but he reaffirmed actually a few spots that we fished with the pontoon. It's just, we were kind of throwing shrimp and I was throwing a kind of a white fluke style bait, if you will. Whereas they use a lot of dark colors. And I think if I just would have switched that dark color, I was just so focused on white. I don't know why, but every time I get in the salt, I always think, I got to fish a white fluke or a white paddle tail. They definitely liked those darker colors better.
Yeah. Um, yeah, when we were fishing with them, we were using darker plastics. And one of the spots we went to was even a spot we went to with the pontoon. And we were using those white baits, but while he likes to use those darker baits, and we caught a lot of fish on those darker plastics.
Well, and we didn't work down that whole shoreline. We literally pulled up to a point where the current was blowing by it. And that's the thing is like, anytime you're fishing inshore, it's kind of like fishing the river where you're fishing current spots, right? And the current spots change with the tide. One spot might be really good when the current's coming in or when the tide's coming in. And then as soon as the tide switches and starts going out, the fish sort of reposition themselves, sort of like being on the river. And we hit this spot, and it was funny. He took us to that spot, and we had already fished it the day before, but we didn't work all the way down that shoreline. And we threw plastics, and I think you were throwing like shrimp or something. But um, I just wish I would have had that darker plastic on, because it's hard to see. The other thing that amazed me too is like, and I know a lot of the saltwater guys are doing it and starting to fish this way, but like they didn't have live scopes, and he had side imaging and he had like a Simrad unit, but he didn't have a live scope. And a lot of those spots that we pulled up to, we caught fish on, but like it would have been cool just to kind of scan that really quick just to see those fish. Or I would like to see those fish, how they get fired up when you start throwing that bait in there. That would be really cool.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, they weren't using any live scope or anything. So some of these spots you just have to throw out and see if they're there or not on these rock ledges. And if you had a live scope, you could just scan that whole rock ledge and be like, okay, they're not here. Or if they are, then yep, they're here.
Yeah, exactly. Both Robbie and I are live scopers, with that's how we fish now, right? Open water, ice. And so when you're blind casting, I don't mind that. I don't mind fishing. I like fishing like that, and sort of blind. It's fun. You don't know what you're going to catch, but to go back out there without a live scope, it's sort of difficult. Like even we joked around about bringing our ice bundle down there and using it, not just with the guides, but like also on a pontoon that we rented. Cause how cool would that be just to like rent a pontoon with almost no electronics? I mean, that thing had a graph, but I don't even know if I'd consider it a graph. It was tiny. It was just like this little 4-inch unit that had a plotter on it. It did have a 2D sonar, which was kind of helpful for when we wanted to get into those flats areas. We didn't know how shallow it was. Um, the biggest thing is like if you rent a boat is safety, right? You don't want to hit an oyster bar. The tide was changing, so it was kind of nice to have a map, but other than that, that thing was useless. But it would have been cool to have, like, let's say, forward-facing sonar unit or a live scope or something like that, just with a clamp. Like I know, like Arc Labs makes a clamp that you can put on anything. You have one on your 14-foot boat. We could have used that on the pontoon easily, but I don't know if Mom would have liked us dragging a forward-facing sonar unit on the plane.
Yeah.
Putting it in the suitcase. If it was just like a guy's fishing trip, I think it would have been cool to put that with. But anyway, my point is it's sort of difficult if you're used to using forward-facing sonar to fish with a captain that doesn't use it at all. And he's a really good angler. Nothing against him. That dude could fish. I mean, he knew all the spots. He grew up in the area. I highly recommend if you're going to that Crystal River area to look up Hang 'em High guide charters. Him and his brother. We met his brother Clay. I know Dan Quinn from Rapala has been out with those guys. He's the one that sort of recommended me fishing with them. We watched their videos. They had fished with several other like YouTubers and stuff. And so definitely good anglers, but it was just interesting the way that they go about fishing every day versus how you and I go about it.
Mm-hmm.
So very cool to be in Florida, to be ice fishing and then go to Florida, right? And then now let's get back to what we did today. And we were back out ice fishing.
Yep.
So just so the listeners know, today is Wednesday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we just got in. We landed on the plane on Sunday. So basically, we went from open water fishing a few days ago to ice fishing. I was pumped to get out. I would say this morning, like my heart wasn't 100% in it as far as like getting up at 5 a.m. and getting after it. But once we started loading the gear, it was kind of nice. We walked out, right? We had our float suits on. We did it safe, but I was amazed how little ice there actually was. I mean, not just mentioning, it being soft and honeycombed, but there was way under a foot left. And we fished just north of our house, so north central Minnesota. I would say when we flew in on the plane, a lot of open water around the Twin Cities for sure. It's probably all out today. As far north as maybe Forest Lake. Anything north of that seems to have ice, at least the bigger bodies of water, but I don't know how much longer. I mean, I told Robbie today was definitely my last day on the ice. I mean, because we've got some things going on tomorrow. This weekend looks like rain, snow. I think you could probably get out this up until this weekend for sure, up on Red Lake or northern Minnesota. But boy, I was shocked how little ice was left, right? And it was getting pretty soft as the afternoon progressed. Like we got out there in the morning, it was really locked up tight, hard, not that honeycombed. But by this afternoon drilling holes, we sort of just drilled our way back to the truck. We walked out, we drug the otter sleds. We brought a forward-facing sonar unit. We brought a couple Markhams, an auger, a few rods. That was about it, right?
Yep.
Very minimal. We went as minimal as we could. I actually thought about loading up the four-wheelers, but I was like, you don't know how the shorelines are going to be, and I'm glad we didn't. I don't know if I would have drove my four-wheeler out on that ice.
Right. Especially in the afternoon, it got really soft.
Correct. The Dialed In Angling podcast is brought to you by St. Croix Rods, handcrafting the best rods on earth for an elevated angling experience since 1948. St. Croix Rods are truly a world-class brand that has earned the respect and admirations of anglers across the planet. I trust St. Croix Rods, and you should too. Check them out at stcroixrods.com.
An unexpected fall into cold water can turn tragic in almost an instant, even for the best of swimmers. As the weather warms up and the ice thaws, make sure you get home safe by always wearing a life jacket and ice picks when recreating on cold water. If you fall in, put your arms on the ice, kick your feet, and roll away from the hole. The best plan is to always go with a buddy and let someone know when you will return. Safety is always in season. A message from the Minnesota DNR.
onX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Download the app today to get fisheries informations in the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin, along with research tools for serious anglers and beginners alike. Filter lakes by species, trophy only, keeper fish, abundance, or all of the above. Plan which lakes to fish with the app, navigate to the accesses, and once you're there, use the onX best-in-class weather imagery and fishing hotspots to catch more fish. onX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you would never known existed. onX Fish, the app that is changing the game on ice. Yeah, I think it's walking from here on out. If you are still thinking about ice fishing, definitely safety concern. Go with a couple buddies, but man, it's getting pretty soft out there. I mean, to the point where, okay, let's say we had 10 inches left, right? But that top inch to 2 inches this afternoon was like butter. I mean, so you can't even really count that. So you're down to 7-8 inches. We did it safely though. We checked every inch of ice, heading out, working as a team. A lot of people that are maybe listening to that, like, hey, that's crazy. You went out ice fishing with your son, but it's really not if you're being safe about it. I don't recommend anybody just walking out right now on different bodies of water. Like I said, it's sort of my last day, but we were safe about it. We went out, we had a lot of fun. The fish were a little finicky. We got some really nice gills, got some decent crappies. The fish on this particular lake we were on is sort of stained water. So they were in like 15 to 19 feet of water. Most of them were suspended a little bit still. There was a lot of fish still coming in. They were definitely spooky, but a lot of them just weren't really biting that well. And we saw that they were spitting up some mayfly nymphs. I think there were feedings on some bloodworms, some different things in that basin still. But you could see the shorelines, especially on the north end of the lake that we were fishing, starting to erode to the point where I bet you, but I would say by next week, those fish will be up in the shallows, don't you think?
Yeah.
There's
for
probably
sure.
fish up there now.
Yeah.
Like, because the lake we fish had wild rice too, and I know those fish love to slide up into that wild rice and feed on bugs, because there's lots of other lakes that I fish late ice where I sight fish for bluegills and crappies in the wild rice. And I would imagine even by the end of the day with the heat that's going to happen in those bays, like the lake we fish, I don't want to give it away, but it had some north end bays that were really shallow, and it had wild rice. And definitely, I would say by this afternoon or even tomorrow with the warm up, that those shallow bays were eroding, and they were to the point where you wouldn't have been able to get out and access the ice from that north end, right? We kind of walked in from would be the west side, I guess. But we could see the north end from where we were at. And like, I would say definitely by I would say the end of the day today, or even the end of the day tomorrow, that there's probably fish up in shallow enough where you could catch them in open water. Along those same lines, I just got off the phone with Marcus Quam. Marcus is a regular contributor to Dialed in Angling, the TV show. If you don't know who Marcus is, Real Therapy Guide Service. He guides out in South Dakota. I filmed an episode with him earlier this year. He's been on the podcast. He's a good friend of mine. And Marcus was telling me about dumping his boat into these areas. You know, when you're out in the Dakotas and you see those culverts where the water's flushing through, and even during midwinter, a lot of times those spots remain open. Well, now they're really open. So there's like 5 or 10 acres of open water. They'll actually dump their boats in right alongside the road and fish that open water. And he was telling me about catching walleyes in those areas, which is cool, because you and I were talking about the north end of this lake. If it goes out, there might be ice on the entire lake, but that north end might be open to the point where you could dump a 14-foot boat in there and fish crappies.
Yep.
And I always think of like different cool opportunities for fishing that you could do before the ice is off the lake. I know you and I do a ton of sucker fishing in the spring. So like feeder creeks and creeks and rivers that open up early, even though the ice isn't off the lakes yet. Those are fishing opportunities. I was talking on the podcast with my Uncle Gary, it would be 2 podcasts ago, about what we call ditch fishing, and that's fishing from the shoreline. Robbie and I do a ton of it, where it might be like a current area in between 2 lakes. It could be just around a bridge or somewhere where the heat, like especially on the north end of a lake, where you have a dock or a shoreline that you can cast that has sort of deep water access, but also has, let's say, wild rice or cattails or bulrushes that are going to hold fish. And a lot of times those fish will slide up really, really shallow, especially on days where it's 50, 60, 70 degrees, and you might not have ice out yet, but those fish will slide up in there. And there's so many opportunities out there that are just waiting for anglers to try, but we hardly ever bump into anybody when we're ditch fishing, right?
Yeah, nobody usually.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people don't even think about it until they can get their boat out there or their docks in. And these shore fishing opportunities are opening up daily. Now, it looks like next week, at least in the beginning of the week, it's going to cool off a little bit. So that slows those things down. So like, for example, this, ditch fishing like we saw today on that north end, those fish might slide in there tomorrow, but as soon as it cools off in the evening, those fish pull back out into deeper water. And so, those fishing opportunities only exist with warm afternoons. And so those fish are kind of coming and going, but it's exciting. It's exciting to talk about open water. My last podcast, I said I wasn't going to talk ice fishing. I really thought the way things were going when we left for Florida, that there was no possibility of ice fishing when we got back. And that wasn't the case. We were able to take advantage of it and get out one more time. I always like kind of, being able to scratch that itch one last time, put an exclamation point on the season. We did it safely. We had fun. It was a blast. And I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we took advantage of today to do it, because I don't know that I would feel comfortable on that body of water anyway of getting back out there tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
So let's get into some other events that occurred over the weekend. You and I were following the Bassmaster Classic a little bit. I'm not a huge bass head in the sense where I follow all the bass tournaments, but I always look at the leaderboard for the Classic. I have a few friends that always fish it. Jeff Gustafson is a good friend of mine. There's some other anglers out there that are always fishing these tournaments, so I always follow them to see how they're doing. Easton Fothergill won it. He won the Bassmaster Classic, Minnesota kid. Pretty cool to see, huh, Robbie?
Yeah, it was super cool.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that he won it, 22-year-old, wins the Bassmaster Classic. Going back to the forward-facing sonar topic, he's definitely a forward-facing sonar person, right? I mean, he's an angler. That's how he fishes. After the Classic, I saw a lot of different debate as far as, should we be using forward-facing sonar? Should we not? Should they be allowed in the tournaments? I'm all for it. I love fishing with forward-facing sonar. No doubt about it. Technology, I embrace technology just like anything else. I've been on board with it since I started fishing with forward-facing sonar, open water and on ice, right? And so I don't think that technology is going away. So why ban that technology from the tournaments? You know? And to see Easton win it with forward-facing sonar, good for him, man. I think that's great. If you can navigate that, you're the best angler. You just won the Bassmaster Classic. It's the way it should be. I'm a firm believer in technology. Why ban it?
Right. Yeah, I agree. Forward-facing sonar lets you do things a lot more or a lot better than other scenarios. Like if you didn't have a forward-facing sonar, in some scenarios, you might not catch these fish, or you wouldn't know these fish were even there before you had a forward-facing sonar.
Yeah, I mean, I know I didn't follow it. We were in Florida, and so we were fishing and doing family stuff, but like I didn't follow it like from cast to cast. But it sounded like his patterns changed a little bit throughout the tournament to the point where he was able to track down fish and get on certain bites with forward-facing sonar that you may not know it existed. To Robbie's point, largemouth bass, walleyes, pike. There's so many times now that I fish out in the basin where I didn't before, right? I only fish structure, and I would work along the structure and cast along the structure and then go to the next piece of structure. Now I feel comfortable getting off structure, and that's for smallmouth bass, for walleyes, largemouth. Prime example, smallmouth fishing, Mille Lacs Lake, one of the best smallmouth destinations on the planet for people, right? I do a ton of guide trips out there. I fish a ton out there. I love smallmouth fishing, but there's times where these reefs get super pressured, right? And these bass will actually slide off the reef, whether it's because of the fishing pressure or they're chasing bait. Like last year with all the young of the year perch in the lake, these bass were really pelagic. And so they were suspended off the edges, and I was catching smallmouth with jerk baits, with swim baits, with freeloaders, like shaking minnows across. Robbie and I shot an episode of Midwest Outdoors, actually, where we threw freeloaders for suspended walleyes off the edge of structure. They were loosely relating to the structure, but without forward-facing sonar, we don't accomplish that. We're not able to throw freeloaders and get that segment done, right? So there's daily examples where forward-facing sonar just makes you a better angler. You're also looking in areas that you weren't looking before. And now I always say when it comes to fishing, like discovery is probably my favorite part of fishing. So like hunting, discovering things, figuring things out, and patterns change all the time. And so it's just cool to look. There's times where I spend half the day looking and I don't even have to wet a line. I'm just amazed at what's unfolding in front of me that I didn't know was there before. And so to see someone like Easton, who's very good at forward facing sonar, go out and kick some tail in the Bassmaster Classic and win it, good for him, man. That's super cool to see. And that's me as an angler, like that. I want to know, first of all, how he won it. And then second of all, I want to do it myself. Right. And so, like I said earlier, with these crappies that are right now that are kind of in transition, that's no different. Like the lake we're on, as soon as the lake goes out or any other lake, you can follow these fish up into the shallows. And then towards evening or the next day when it cools off, these fish will start to slide out of the shallows a bit. You can follow them and you can watch that unfold. It's pretty cool to see. I can't wait for spring crappie fishing. I love spring crappie fishing. I was talking last week on the podcast about, the potential of Minnesota opening up bass for catch and release only in the spring, because I would love to be able to bass fish in the spring before opener. What are your thoughts, Robbie?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you get a lot of opportunities where bass slide up really shallow alongside those bluegills and crappies and panfish, that a lot of times you catch a lot of bass just fishing for panfish, and I think there'd be a lot of great opportunities to go and catch a lot of largemouth that slide way up shallow.
Heck yeah. That would be so. I mean, we do, like when we're crappie fishing and you catch a few largemouth, that's fun, man. It's
right.
Light pound test. We're using 4-pound test, but it would be really fun in the afternoons to also have, let's say, a couple jerk baits tied up, a couple X-Wraps or flukes or something that you could throw up there, and then just twitch those baits back to the boat, whack on a few largemouth, and then, go back to crappie fishing. It would open up fishing opportunities on lakes like Mille Lacs Lake, for example, right? Smallmouth bass that are sliding shallow. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there for anglers and for, because I make my living in the fishing industry, I want to see tackle sales and licenses and things that, would benefit the fishing industry by having a catch and release bass season before opener. Because ultimately, I mean, bass opener is what? Memorial Day weekend in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Most people are fishing bass before then by the opener, catch and release only. And most of the time when you're fishing these bass, since it's catch and release, they're shallow. You're not hurting them. You're pulling them out of shallow water. I'm not targeting bass out in deep water. I think most people, if they're going to go fishing on a day in the spring, they're going to go when it's nice out, when the fish move up and transition into those shallow water areas. So I'm all for it, man. I think I would love to have another fishing opportunity. We've talked on this podcast already about, let's just say Florida aside. Okay, we ice fish this week. You could definitely sucker fish, right? Which we're going to do if it stays warm. We go into these little feeder creeks, catch suckers. Imagine if bass was open. You could go bass fishing this week. So you could crappie fish, ice fish, bass fish, all in the same week. That would be pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Oh, and not to mention we went to Florida too. So we could get in another fishing opportunity there on our checklist. Ditch fishing, all of the above. I love any sort of fishing opportunity that lies in the spring because we're kind of in that transition, right? So I know there's destinations that I'm looking forward to going. Like I'll be heading to Green Bay in the next week or so. I've been talking to Marcus Quam about getting out to the river in South Dakota. Border waters as far as the Rainy River. That's another destination that I always try to hit this time of year. But when I can't go to destinations to fish, it's nice to look in your own backyard and say, okay, what's available out there that I can do? Let's say, if you're going to work, or for you, Robbie, like you're heading to baseball here in a couple hours. Well, what sort of fishing opportunities can you hit on your way to baseball? I'm always looking for new opportunities, and that having bass open would give you an opportunity to fish another species during this time period before we get to a fishing opener. Because it's a long ways off, man. We're at the end of March right now. We're not even in April yet, and we're already talking about ice out conditions. Well, there's only so many days you can crappie fish, and I love crappie fishing. Don't get me wrong, but if there was some bass fishing opportunities really close to home, I would do those as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'd be really fun to be able to go and target bass alongside panfish.
I love throwing jerk baits, like for crappies and stuff, like in the spring. But guess what? Bass love jerk baits as well. And you and I love throwing jerk baits. That would be so fun to just be able to do it legally. We catch bass as a bycatch. And when I'm talking jerk baits, I'm talking little number 6s. So I am specifically targeting crappies. But it would be nice to be able to throw them for bass, or throw a hair jig or a fluke or something like that. It'd be fun. And like, I can think of so many areas where, the bass come into the shallows, and it'd just be a riot to throw a hard bait or something different. Because like this week, just getting down to Florida and being able to cast, catching fish aside, just to be able to cast was so much fun. We threw the paddle tails, like I said, for the gags. We also caught quite a few snook on some plastics. I'd say the plastics we threw looked a lot like a Ned rig. I won't give the plastics away, but it was basically like Ned rigging for the snook. It was a lot of fun. We caught a bunch of giant snook. And for me, I could have fished more live bait, but I didn't, because I wanted to fish a plastic. Even Robbie, there was times where I told him, just go away from the live bait, because you can fish so much faster with a plastic down there, right? And you can cover water quickly. And I think in saltwater in particular, they're so tied to live bait all the time that I think they forget to fish plastics. Because like when we do fish plastics with these guys, we wail on them. And I know when I go down there on my own with a few buddies, I've had some of the best fishing days on plastics. Don't get me wrong. I've caught a ton of snook on a pilchard minnow. I've caught a ton of redfish on popping corks with shrimp, but I've caught a lot more with plastics at times. And I think if you just stick with the plastic too, you can kind of power fish. I would like to get down there. I've never fished with a guide down there that has forward-facing sonar. I would love to get down and fish with some saltwater captains that are starting to utilize the technology. I know some are, like at 10,000K guide service. I know a few buddies that have gone out with him. I saw the Linders. I saw their videos. They're targeting tarpon with forward-facing sonar. So there are some charter captains, really embracing the technology. And I'm just amazed that there's not more, I was surprised when we got down there. The guys we had the nicest boats, the nicest equipment. They had power poles. They had, all the sweet electronics. I mean, the dude had a 16-inch unit, just didn't utilize forward-facing sonar, which isn't bad. We caught a ton of fish. It didn't take away from the experience we had. It would have been cool to be able to see that and watch that unfold. I mean, can you fish without it and have a good time? 100%. But it's no different than any other technology. I look at it like mapping or 2D sonar. Can you fish without it? 100%. Does it help you catch more fish? 1,000%. And so it's no different for me. This week, we fished ice fishing with forward-facing sonar. Went down there, casted, no forward-facing sonar. Came back up here. We hunted down crappies today and bluegills with forward-facing sonar. Those fish were moving at I wouldn't say they were moving in leaps and bounds, but they were moving enough that you needed it. Otherwise, you weren't catching them.
Right. Yeah, it's just so much different. Here, you always have your live scope looking for fish, getting on fish with your live scope. And you go down to Florida and you're just casting. It's still super fun. It's just so much different, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think even as the technology progresses, I think you're going to see people utilizing we joke about it today, and we joked about it today when we were kind of checking out some shore spots, but I think you're going to see people utilizing it even from shore casting. Like today when we checked out those spots, I was like, oh, we should grab the forward-facing sonar and put it down and just kind of look and see if we could see fish out, just beyond where the ice had retreated from the shoreline. And I guarantee you could have saw fish, and it would have been a helpful technology to know even where to cast. And I know that's an extreme example, but it's not that far-fetched. And so even scouting spots like that, like our shore fishing spots, I really want to just bring a forward-facing sonar unit with a pole and just kind of scan the shallows to see if I can see crappies and bluegills as they move in that really shallow water. Whether I run it on perspective mode or forward-facing sonar, either way, it would be kind of cool to use it in that setting, because I know a lot of kayakers that fish extremely shallow, or even in my boat, when I look up underneath docks or shallow, I'm using forward-facing sonar on my trolling motor. I don't see why you couldn't use it from the shoreline looking out.
Right.
So, well, that is pretty much the wrap of our show, our podcast this week. Again, my last day on the ice for sure. I think there'd be opportunities tomorrow and probably into the weekend. It looks like it's going to cool down the first part of next week. And so I'm sure up north, there's still ice fishing opportunities. I know there's a lot of hardcore and diehard ice anglers that are still going to get after it. For me, I think I'm hanging up the Strike Master for the year. I had a lot of fun. I had a great season, but I am so looking forward to open water fishing. As we get into next week, I'm going to hopefully be doing a podcast talking about some Green Bay fishing. We'll see how the weather brings. I also want to bring in some fishing reports for from some people. I wanted to do it this week, but the Rainy River wasn't quite open yet. It's been cold up north. I talked to Marcus out in South Dakota. There's not a lot going on quite yet out there, except for out in Chamberlain. He just said things are still kind of locked up. I was hoping some of the sloughs in South Dakota were starting to loosen up. Definitely the Twin Cities ice is retreating. Iowa's out. So there are some open water opportunities. I just haven't gotten a lot of fishing reports from those folks yet. I'm hoping next week at this time we can give you some more fishing reports. I want to check in with some other anglers that are getting after it. I'm hoping next week at this time I'll be able to do some ditch fishing, maybe even get out in the boat crappie fishing with my buddy Robbie here. And we can start moving content towards open water, because I had a blast today, man, especially to say that we went from saltwater a little over 48 hours ago to back on the ice was pretty neat to say. I've had that happen a lot where, I'll ice fish and I'll be in the boat within 24-hour period. But to be in saltwater situation and then back ice fishing is mind-blowing for some people, especially if you're from the South, because those guys don't get it. Like, I was joking with the guide and I said, yeah, hey man, I don't care what I catch as long as I'm casting, because I've been ice fishing for 6 months. And I don't think they get the realm of that.
Right.
He's like, yeah, well, it gets cold in Florida, but he doesn't realize like ice fishing and the extent of ice fishing and the level of ice fishing that we do in Minnesota, and the level that I do as a guide with Dialed In Angling, the amount of ice fishing that we've done. I know Robbie goes on a lot of trips with me. I know scouting for Dialed In Angling, you helped me a lot doing that. We filmed a show for next year, so we do a lot together on ice. So it was so nice to get out in the boat together and then be back, get one last ice fishing trip in, and then we can close the door to that chapter and start moving towards open water content. So you're going to want to tune in next week. We're going to have some open water content for you. Like I said, hopefully be giving you a report from Green Bay. We'll be talking about some hopefully Rainy River opportunities, fishing in South Dakota. I want to check back in with Marcus Quam. I know he's chomping at the bit to get out in his boat as well. I had a lengthy conversation with him. He's always a great contributor to the show. So Until next week, I'm your host, Tony Roach. Thanks for tuning in to the Dialed In Angling podcast. Robbie, thanks for just sitting in with me last minute, bud. I know you got to get to baseball, so I really appreciate it. Thanks for being on the show.